Hi there, welcome to a special edition of Brewers Journal Canada's Brewers Lecture Series, the virtual edition, made possible by our presenting sponsor BSG and supporting sponsors SCAFab, GBV 360, Pro, and Nameless Productions. My name is Shelley Bierns, and I'm one of our 4 sales managers for BSG Canada, covering key accounts in Southwestern Ontario. I will be hosting and moderating today's virtual edition of Brewers Lectures. And we are coming to you live from my home and other homes I see in Guelph. Due to technical issues, Ren unfortunately will not join us today, and I will both moderate and also participate in the supplier panel later this afternoon. I would like to thank you all for joining us now, given the circumstances, as well as the short turnaround in putting this special edition together. Usually we would start spreading the word on any Brewers Lectures events 3 months in advance, but due to these peculiar times, along with developing news surrounding COVID-19 being released practically every 5 minutes, Brewers Journal Canada felt it was extremely necessary to launch today's talks ASAP. For those of you who are familiar with the Brewers Lectures event series, we would all be meeting up at some creative space, listening to leaders in the beer and beverage industry from around the world speak on various subjects affecting the industry. Of course, midway, we would all be able to enjoy the latest craft beer offering from a multitude of breweries and beverage producers. Today, I am inviting you to join me in day drinking from the comforts of your own home or workplace, remembering to keep 2 meters away from the nearest warm body. And as I throw some important and time-sensitive questions to our guest speakers. These speakers represent 3 important sectors of our industry and community: production and hospitality, supply chain, and lastly, those representing the interests of our growing Canadian craft beer industry. We are going to talk about COVID-19 outbreak and the way craft brewers and everyone else involved has been impacted and how they are navigating this moment, as well as how to plan and prepare to the best of our abilities for what happens next in the near term and the long term post-COVID-19 world, as this is probably the most challenging time the beer industry and the hospitality industry have ever faced. So I have my beer. I don't know what you guys have. I'm having a Royal City 2 Rivers from my town. The The past 5 weeks have been emotional, I know that, and there have been a lot of fear, unknowns, pain, worry, frustration. I myself have been able to talk with many customers and brewers who've been laid off, have had to do the laying off, packing boxes with cans and bottles, throwing them into vans, running them around their communities. Skeleton crews trying to keep up if they're lucky enough to have a nice distribution system. So it's been hard, but also there's been a lot of laughter and hope. And then, you're seeing a lot of creativity coming along now as we're kind of settling in mid-April. There's thanks and plenty of community. I've watched hundreds of breweries open across the country. So successfully, we've become friends, great partners, builders together. But I know that breweries inside the center of everyone has a creative engine, and it's in the heart of every brewer. So I know that we'll navigate through this, and that's what today's about, and supporting community. And I think that's what everyone does so well. So today we'll have these 3 panel discussions, along with 5 short-minute breaks in between. Our first panel will feature representatives from 4 breweries: Steam Whistle, Black Lab Brewing, Dominion City Brewing, and Big Rock. Our second panel will have BSG Canada, Lakeside Process Controls, and Diversey. And the third will be Beer Canada and the Canadian Craft Brewers Association. So let's jump into our first panel. And joining us is Tim McLaughlin from Steam Whistle, Billy Madden at Black Lab Brewing, Josh McJannett at Dominion City Brewing, and Wayne Arsenault from Big Rock. And I appreciate all of you guys taking the time to be here today. So the first question, I hope everything sounds okay. So everything looks good, guys? Excellent.
Sounds great.
Okay. So this is for Tim at Steam Whistle. And how has this crisis that we've all been facing affected your business? And what are the larger ramifications beyond the licensees temporarily closing up shop, et cetera? And how's morale been?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously a challenging situation, I think, for all brewers. And in our case, we're no different. You look at, the major areas that are directly affected are obviously on-premise sales, but as well, we do a significant amount of business on site through our events department. We operate a restaurant as well as have a significant tour program that essentially took roughly 48% of our revenue offline right away. And so our focus quickly became, cash flow. How do we manage cash so that, we are able to continue to operating once we pass this crisis? And so taken a number of steps to try and manage through that. And that's certainly been challenging. I think for us, we really have taken first and foremost health and safety as the number one priority, both in terms of how we operate the brewery, because we're still running, but also in terms of sort of what we're asking of our staff and ensuring that health and safety is first and foremost, and then really the financial health of the company a second, to make sure that we can weather this storm, because obviously it is really impacting our revenue. We've seen actually an increase in terms of retail sales in some markets. So there's no doubt that especially on larger format packs, consumers are loading up. And I think overall consumption is probably up a little bit as well. So some of the volume we would have seen on premise has flowed into the retail channel, which has been positive, but still obviously not enough to cover or stem the tide of all of those other areas of the business being offline. I've been impressed with, although, I think the big thing that surprised me is how easy that it is to work remotely, and how, as a leader, it's still really not that challenging to manage your team effectively and to continue to move projects forward. So that's been really encouraging. And I think, as a group, we've been nimble and quick to, as a brand, be relevant to consumers as they're going through this challenging time. I think beer is a great example of something that can bring a sense of normalcy to Canadians throughout this challenging time. And so that's really how we've approached it as a brand. We started a program called Home Office Happy Hour on Instagram. So every day at 6 or every day at 5 o'clock, we partner with a local musician, puts on a performance, and then hopefully bringing people together and, virtually when they are distantly or physically distant. And actually, we were very flattered when Molson, so a week later launched a program called Virtual Happy Hour, which is more or less the same thing. So I guess imitation is the best form of flattery. So we've tried to remain relevant to consumers, but obviously it's been a big challenge. But I think overall, like, our spirits are still high, and we know this isn't a great thing, so we got to get through it. But there's no doubt it's having a huge impact on the business.
Okay. Wayne, can you comment on that?
Yeah, we're pretty similar with Tim. The on-premise hit has been tough for our customers and tough for us, as well as we have a pretty substantial events business, as well as our 3 restaurants and 3 retail shops. Retail shops have fared well because we we actually moved our salespeople into delivery people and dropping things off with a no-touch delivery service. So retail sales, our own retail has gone up. Restaurants have gone to 0. On-premise has gone to 0. And then in Alberta, where we're independent retailers and chain retailers, there's no government retailing, particularly in the Alberta market. We're seeing a real divergence with the retailers with, I guess, anybody in 1,500 square foot homes and larger are really stocking up, and we've struggled to keep up with the packages that those consumers desire. But then small packages have just single serve and 6-packs or smaller have really sharply declined, and independent retailers have sharply declined in this environment. And then similar in the BC marketplace and the Saskatchewan marketplace, where we're seeing the exact same trends in the business. So, it's been redeploying people to do things that they traditionally haven't done. Similar to Tim working from home, I am just absolutely amazed at how much time you got to spend on the phone now, and all those conversations that you would have each and every day that now have to take place via Skype, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and whatever other platform we're using in order to stay connected. So it's been very interesting times, to say the least. Business planning by the hour, at the start, by the day now, and maybe at some point we'll get back to planning by the week. But it sure isn't planning for a full year plan anymore. Things have changed dramatically.
Great, thanks, guys. These are questions for Josh and Billy. I'll start with Billy. For breweries such as Black Lab, whose success is dependent upon the taproom sales, mostly to locals, but you're also a fairly new brewery. If you can say when you opened, that'd be great. What challenges does the current pivot to front door and online sales present to your business model? Is it sustainable? And how steady has it been? And then Josh.
Yeah, I think we're in the same boat as most other people at this point. Being a small brewery and being new, we opened up in October 2018, so just over a year and a half now. It's been a change for sure. We went from having 70% of our sales through our tap room, 20% through our bottle shop, and 10% to licensees, to pretty much 100% now through our bottle shop and through deliveries. One of the good things, unlike the other two, we are really small in comparison. So we don't have a restaurant. We don't have those losses. So we've been able to pivot fairly quickly. Being a small brewery and locally as well, we can change and pivot very quickly, which thankfully we had to do, and we were able to do very quickly. I'm on the road 12 hours a day now delivering bottles to customers. There's been a lot of positives to come out of this too. I don't want to focus on just the negatives. We've had time now to do some things that we've wanted to do for a while, such as launching an online retail shop, revamping our website, doing some projects here in the brewery that we wanted to get to, but we just could never find the time. Those are kind of things that we're looking forward to, and we're actually happy to have the time to do them. In terms of sales, our community, our supporters, our followers have been incredible. The first week we were petrified. We had no idea what to expect, and we were blown away by the support. Our sales aren't quite what they used to be before, obviously, but they're sustainable. We can come through this now. I think you asked the question, how long can we sustain this? I don't know. I don't want to think about that right now, to be quite honest. It's like when we were building the brewery, I kept hearing there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Well, that's all fine and good, unless it's a big rig coming down at you, right? Like a big semi-truck coming through that tunnel with their lights blaring at you. I think there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I can see some things changing in the industry and the community right now where I think we're going to be okay. But time will tell. So we'll see what happens.
Thanks, Billy. Josh?
Yeah, so we've been open since 2014. So we're in our sixth year, and we do about 6,500 hex a year. You know, and we are overwhelmingly focused in the Ottawa market. We have some licensees in Toronto, and obviously that distribution has gone to zero, along with all the other bars and restaurants closed by the province. You know, a month ago, I guess it was, you know, we'd made the decision to close our tap room, I don't know, call it 46 hours ahead of public health closing it for us. So, you know, that happened, and we came in on Monday, and then of course within, you know, a day, all of the bars and restaurants were closed. So like everybody else has said, we're sort of staring into the abyss because we don't have big exposure to what I kind of call offsite retail. We don't have any listings at the LCBO. We have, you know, 2 listings that are at a handful of grocery stores and beer stores. But I would say between the tap room and our licensee business, you know, that 90% of our revenue had kind of evaporated, and you really had a big sort of question mark hanging over what to do now. So I really honestly, just to echo what everybody else has said about working safely and relying on your team, I cannot say enough about how our team has just pivoted. We've all become Amazon-style beer fulfillment specialists. We're fortunate to have had a website in place that we've been using to sell beer to people across the province. It wasn't a huge piece of our business, but you know, we'd have orders going out across the province every week, and the infrastructure was in place when we could hit the ground running. And I was not prepared for how much of our community was going to show up for us. And I think, you know, you guys had talked about how a beer is an affordable comfort in a world that doesn't feel very comfortable right now. And I think we've seen that as well. My inbox is just flooded every day from emails from our fans who are just expressing gratitude just to, you know, have something as simple as a beer come to their door, so they can take that break at happy hour in their home office. I think that's an awesome initiative. So I think everybody here has been feeling like there's a real kind of sense of purpose behind what we're doing. I know we just make beer for a living, and in a sense, maybe that doesn't seem all that, you know, enlightened or important when you're thinking about other essential workers. But I think there are a lot of people for whom that comfort is fairly essential right now. And so everybody's just been awesome. You know, we have people who are actually coming back now to their cellaring jobs and canning jobs and brewing jobs because we need the beer. We're actually currently basically sold out of beer, which is not where we anticipated being 5 weeks ago. So it's great that that's happened. But in the meantime, they've been out running, you know, 40, 50 stop deliveries every day, and just doing whatever it takes to get done. So I feel like, you know, our little brewery family is closer now than we've ever been, and everybody very much just kind of got the spirit of let's just get it done. So I also think, just one other observation, that I think there's a lot of really amazing goodwill out there. Like, it's amazing how something like this kind of brings people together. And contrary to rather than making us all animals, it makes people want to do a bit of good. We slapped up an opportunity to check out your beer on our website with a donation to our local food bank, and you know, we've passed $15,000 for a little food bank. It's real money. So that's just for the generosity of our customers who, while they're buying a beer, throw on a couple bucks. So pretty incredible.
This is a question. I have a question about difficult decisions. And instead of asking you what particular decisions were the most difficult, could you choose one maybe for people maybe that are still in the middle of making those hard decisions? And Wayne, can you help with that maybe, or someone else can speak up to guide them if they're maybe not quite where you guys are? Maybe it's about people, product decisions, ingredient decisions, something like that. Wayne, would you want to go first?
Well, I don't know if there were difficult decisions because we haven't had to do any major layoffs. Well, we had to lay off some restaurant staff, some of our part-time staff. We haven't had to lay off any full-time staff, and that's really been rewarding because experiencing that in the past, that is just gut wrenching to have to go through that exercise. And I don't relish if we have to get to that point, because I don't know if our particular company, if we qualify for any of the federal programs that are currently in place. But there was some things because, as Tim said, the first thing you got to do is, in a crisis, it's customer cash and what's your constraints. And on the cash front, before all the lockdowns started, we looked at all of our ingredients, and any ingredients, particularly hops, that had to come across borders, and we ordered extra. So we had to fork out some cash at a time where we knew we needed cash, but we wanted to shore up our supply chain. So some things like that were things that, you got to fork out quite a bit of money to make sure that you got supplies on hand, make sure you don't run out. And particularly with anything that has to come from the U.S. Luckily for us, all our major things, malt, boxes, cans, bottles, are all from within Canada. So at least the big money items, we didn't have to fork out. But some of the other items, we stocked up on those to make sure we don't run out. And at a time when you want to preserve your cash, forking out cash for things like that was, can be daunting.
Yeah.
So if I can just add to that too, cash on hand obviously is the biggest thing right now. One of the hardest things we had to do was try and plan and project our packaging needs, not knowing if they were going to be essential services or not. So we, same as you just mentioned, Wayne mentioned, we stockpiled too. We stockpiled bottles, we stockpiled crowns, everything we can get our hands on, we brought in-house, just to make sure we would be okay for the long term.
Yeah, I mean, it couldn't have come at a possible worse time, I think, is one of the other challenges with this, coming out of the winter seasonality, where obviously we're selling a significantly amount less beer throughout the winter. This is the time of year where cash reserves are certainly not as flush as they would be, say, at the end of the summer. So I think, it's important to make decisions quickly. And I think actively managing this situation is important, because if for some reason, at any point we, end up in a situation where liquor stores, beer stores are no longer essential services, then the situation changes even more greatly, right? And so we've been operating, with updating our cash flow models almost on a weekly basis to really understand where we're at, and also managing to a couple of different windows in terms of where this thing goes. Because I think you'd ask me, when this thing started, I had a good feeling it would be over by the end of May. I'm not so confident on that we sit here today. So, and I think, some of the other things were mentioned are important. I think, we've moved very quickly to put as much product into package as we could, because, there was the possibility that the brewery could be shut down. And so the hope of having as much product already packaged prior to that, especially as we look at the seasonality, was a key for us. For us, it was also challenging that most of our draft product is made in one facility. We have two breweries, and those tanks were full, and obviously we're sitting on not an insignificant amount of draft, in the neighborhood of roughly 1,000 kegs that are now sitting there, not really destined to do something. So partnered with Spirit of York to use some of that draft to make hand sanitizer, but there's a lot of it there that's likely going to be past date by the time we're able to sell it.
All right. There's some questions about the kegs. We'll bring that up in a minute. One just came in. I guess there's a question about innovation, and I've been talking with some brewers and getting calls about, we're still craft brewers, or we're brewers. We want to. I think what's happened is you kind of maybe focused on your core brands to see what would happen, and then now, a few weeks in, half a month in, can you introduce in new things, and then how does that look packaged? Because I'm getting calls to play around with malts and yeast and stuff like that, to throw something in just to keep those consumers happy. Is there a place for that?
I certainly think so. I mean, I think, we just launched a beer last week, Session Lager, which is a 4% longer. And, we were in the situation where we had all the work in progress already in tank. We had cans at the facility, and it's obviously not an ideal time to be launching a brand. And I think, our intention is to do it in a way that's sort of sensitive and understanding of the fact that it's a very challenging time for a lot of Canadians. But I think, we still had the support of a key partner in the LCBO helping us drive some distribution on the product. And so we might as well get it on shelves, but also, again, do it in a way that's sort of reflective of understanding that this is a challenging time. So, we don't want to be EB Games hosting a big launch party or, setting up lineups outside of the brewery for people trying to get the product. But I think there still is room to do interesting stuff for beer drinkers. We're always looking for that next beer, right?
I would think now is almost the perfect time to be doing that, considering some of the things that we always rely on are not available anymore. So take what we can get and let's try something new. I mean, we are in the craft beer business. Let's make something. So that's what we've been doing, and we're lucky that we're small. We introduce new product all the time, so our fans and our clients have come to expect that.
Yeah, and we've had calls for that. We just launched 4 new beers, summer seasonals, and then also we're going to bring back one of those things that's just like a warm blanket, McNally's Extra, which is kind of an iconic brand out in Western Canada, and we haven't made that for a number of years, but we've had a lot of people, for whatever reason, asking for it online, so we're going to bring that back and give some people that nice warm blanket to cuddle up with, and have some fun. I think people still want the innovation. They want the excitement. They want the fun of beer and the feeling of togetherness that it gives you to bring people together in times when you can't physically come together. I think that still exists today, even more so than it did prior to COVID-19.
Josh, what are you guys doing?
Yeah, we're in a similar boat. We're small, so we make a lot of different products, and it's a real driver of taproom business for sure. So we're in that habit, and I agree. I mean, I think people are more time on their hands to pay attention, and they're happy to have an opportunity to try some new stuff. We put together a mix pack and created an Instagram live show. We did 6 episodes and drank a beer together with people, and just interviewed staff from the brewery and had a bit of fun. We had a piece of plexiglass up between 2 chairs, and whatever. It was something. That was fun. So I agree with these guys. I think we can still be ourselves in this environment. In fact, I think people are looking to us to still be us.
Yeah.
I think we're in the business of bringing people together, and maybe it's almost our responsibility to figure out ways on how we bring community back, in this time. I'm only thinking that off the top of my head, but I mean, that is really the business we're in.
Yeah, when this first hit, my first thought was there's no way we're an essential business. It just felt wrong to me to have that title. But as I'm going through this and the amount of feedback we're getting, the positive feedback, the thank you emails I'm getting, just really reinforces that we are binding people together. We are bringing people together. People want what we're doing. So it feels really good. And it's still taking me some time to get used to, but I guess we are an essential service.
There's a question that came in, and I'm reading it right. It's a question about, and I've seen this happen. Outlaw Brewing is doing it. I know the new brewery in Elmira, Ontario is doing it. For big city breweries in the big cities, can you hook up easily with the hospitality and cooking and restaurant industry when they're delivering meals to pair beer up with it? I've seen it in some places. Is it easy to do? Like, how much time do you guys have to exploring that, I suppose?
Yeah, I can speak to that. We're actually working on a little project right now. Usually this time of year, we do a fundraising dinner for the Ottawa School Breakfast Program. So we get 120 seats at a big coffee roastery, and we do a beer pairing dinner. We get a bunch of chef friends of ours together, and everybody takes a fresh look at classic brunch dishes. And, we raise $15,000 or something like that for school lunches, school breakfasts. Can't do that this year, but restaurants are some of them are open and trying to get entrepreneurial about getting good food to people for the same reasons people want good beer. I think good food is a comfort too. So a lot of our friends and customers are in that situation, and so racking our brains how we could do something for them, do something for a cause we care about that, had to change this year. So we're putting together almost like a restaurant rally. So we're going to, create a space where we can sell you a meal. It'll include a donation to the Ottawa School Breakfast Program. You buy a family-style meal from your choice of a handful of restaurants who are all going to, be pumping out meals, and it'll all be curbside pickup for the night. So we're trying to find ways to be useful to our licensee partners. We normally send an email around with what beer is available. We had no beer available, but we told them, if you want, we got a guy who's our social media photographer, and he'll come to your place and, signal boost your takeout offering. So we're just trying to find little ways to be useful to people who are hurting at least as badly as we are, if not way worse. So that's kind of been our MO.
In terms of the beer delivery, it hasn't seemed to, taken off in any material, huge way with the restaurant partners we have. We've certainly moved quickly to try and work with, especially some of our team partners, where there's some scale there to provide an attractive package offering for them to pair with their food. So we've got a 4x355 ml can format that we think is sort of ideal for somebody that's ordering dinner. And we've got some pickup from some of our restaurant partners. The challenge with it, though, is initially a lot of the food logistics platforms like Uber Eats and I think Skip the Dishes initially weren't able to figure out the legality around actually handling the product. I think from an age majority perspective, but I do think now they have figured it out. So we might start to see that pick up even more, hopefully. But, echo that point, just trying to work collaboratively to do whatever we can to help, ensure that they still have some revenue coming in, even in a situation where obviously their operations are hindered even much worse than the brewing industry.
I actually have a question for you guys about this. I don't know if you had a chance to give it much thought, but I think I read that the decision to allow licensees to do beer and wine and liquor to go with food is in place until at least December. And I wonder if it's one of these things that isn't going to be in place forever. And I wonder, I know it's got to be sold with food, but when the world makes sense again and you can go and have a nice dinner, how significant a sales channel do you guys anticipate that'll become for a bar or restaurant? Because to me, if you've enjoyed a bottle of wine with dinner and you can take one to go, or you don't have to go to the beer store and get your 6-pack of Steam Whistle or something, that could fundamentally change the restaurant business to me if it were to take off. But I don't know.
Yeah, I think though, my bigger concern with where the restaurant business is at in terms of beverage alcohol is that I think, consumers are increasingly price sensitive when it comes to beverage alcohol. They see value in the food because I don't think they feel they can make the meal, but the can that, is marked up to $9 that they could buy for $3.50 is a different story. And so, we're trying to work through that challenge sort of when we're in steady state with on-premise, like how do you still provide value to those consumers? And so, I think there's a bigger opportunity for sort of direct-to-consumer channels to pick up significant volume. It's potential that restaurants would be able to steal some of that share. But if you can order the package at the retail cost through another provider and pay much less, I think that's probably going to be a preferred channel. But it remains to be seen. I think I certainly think that, with some of the wine pairing opportunities that might be out there as well as cocktails, there could be some really interesting opportunities for these bars and restaurants who are now seeing significant volume being driven through these Skip the Dishes and Uber Eats and whatnot. So,
a few things to cover. There's a question that came in again. This is from, I think it's Alex from Together We're Bitter in Brewing in Kitchener. He's wondering if there are any things that stood out. We've talked about many of these already. That you've implemented, like your outreach, sales, delivery, and staffing that you see as sticking around that maybe you hadn't considered before?
Yeah, I don't know how well people know Ottawa, but Barrhaven is really far from our brewery, and I had no idea so many people in Barrhaven wanted our beer. So we have talked about that. seems like there might actually be something to this idea of having sort of a local delivery service that makes sense for a brewery of our scale and size. We'll just have to see, but it seems like people are going to get used to having beer appear on their doorstep in a big hurry.
Yeah, same here. Toronto's quite a big market, and we've expanded our delivery zone quite wide now, and it still keeps growing. I'm driving almost an hour outside of Toronto to make some of these deliveries. So the demand for beer delivery, I think, is going to stick around with us at least. Maybe a question for you guys too. We have a service here in Toronto called Boozer, So we've signed up with them, and we're going to see how that works out. But these apps like Uber Eats and Foodora and all those other apps and Boozer now, I don't know. I don't see if there's going to be a huge value with that. What do you guys see? Do you guys have any of those on-demand apps that you're signed up with?
We use both Boozer and Foodora, and it's obviously they leverage the LCBO channel to secure the product. It's ordered on there, I think, for the most part. So there is sometimes challenges around availability of product that's on the app. We're not seeing huge volumes, at least currently, going through it in comparison to the retail channel. I do think, I agree that there is certainly potential for home delivery to be something that has a bigger role for beer consumers moving forward. The question I have around that is, with Boozer or Foodora, there's still that sort of opportunity to do some exploration across products, across brands, and I think that has been such, the seismic shift we've seen in the last 10 years is people really mixing and matching, exploring different products, and that's probably harder to do with an online experience. And so, will consumers, stay with what's currently happening, which is loading up in large formats, or are they going to go back to sort of mixing and matching and buying single units the way that they were prior to that? I don't have the answer to that question, but it's certainly something we're watching closely.
Yeah, we're having the same experience. We've used a couple or 3 different third-party delivery formats, but by far and away, going through our own website and our own deliveries is, it's not even a competition, and it's we're 15 times is going through that versus going through other parties.
Okay.
So far it's all been, I think it's here to stay, and I think it's for all of us. We're going to have to figure out, how do you service this? How do you staff it, and how do you manage it, and how do you effectively pick these orders and make this happen every day if this continues to grow at this rate?
That makes me think of this question. How did you guys choose the incentives? You'll see, free shipping over $50, or Canada Post $10 shipments, or what? How did you guys find the method and the incentive? Or was it just rolling the dice?
Ours, we looked at our gross profit per SKU and made some assumptions around mileage and labor to understand. We netted out, we're direct delivering, so not using Canada Post, which I think is challenging given now they're not able to really deliver to people's homes because they're not checking ID currently because of the face-to-face interaction. So we looked at our gross profit per SKU, and then tried to make sure that if we were doing it, we were at least breaking even. Obviously, don't expect to have the same margin that channel as we might others, but that was really how we looked at it. And ours is a 2-case minimum for free delivery, which started in Toronto, is now rolled out into Kingston, London, Oakville, Burlington. So we've continued to bring on geographies, leveraging our sales team when it made sense to do so.
For me, it was just real simple. We have people, want to employ them. Our salespeople are not allowed to go to stores, not allowed to do any of those kinds of visits. So we just made it free, and we're making the deliveries. And post COVID-19, we'll figure all that out. But for now, it's given our people employment, and we're able to get our beer out to customers. So I'm okay with that. Not making any money on that, if you worked it all out. But that's not the point right now. I'm perfectly happy if we break even, or even if it's a slight cost. That's okay for now. We had to do something to keep our people working.
Same. Yeah, we chose $50 just as a random number. We're not even looking at it as a profit. We're just hoping to get beer out to customers. It also keeps me on the road, so allows some of my staff to stay working here in the brewery, which one of our biggest concerns was keeping our staff employed. So that's what we came up with.
Yeah, we're in the same boat. Some people around here think I went too low with the minimum. So
Yeah.
bit of a vote of contention, depending on who you ask.
We're definitely seeing customers go above and beyond that, though.
I didn't know anything about it, Josh. There's two more kind of areas of questions. One's on the governmental support and assistance, and other ones on kegs. And we have about 10 minutes, 12 minutes. So there's some questions that came in earlier. And they were about when on-premise comes back, are you planning, and I've heard this several times, planning on discounting kegs? Like, how are you approaching getting your beer back on tap? And clean. And then the other question is, what's the best way to handle that if it's still in code?
Well, I'll go first, just because we're small and it's going to be a very quick answer. We've never discounted kegs. We build all of our relationships with our licensees. We work with them hand in hand. I expect those relationships that we forged over the past year to continue. And we'll just see how it flows. We'll see what happens.
We don't intend to discount either. I mean, one of the things that we did quickly was we did refund, or we took back unopened product, which I think helped a lot of our partners out. So I think there's some goodwill that came from that. Our expectation is we'll have some advance notice as to when bars and restaurants will reopen, which will allow, I mean, I'm more concerned about the production side really than I am about losing taps necessarily. So how we navigate, scaling up brewing operations for draft again, when the situation's still somewhat uncertain, I think is going to be the biggest challenge and the biggest decision that we need to work through.
We were actually lucky, since we have so few licensees, we allowed them to keep the product, and we're going to give them a credit. So that way they can at least enjoy the product, have some beer on them.
That's the deal.
Yeah, might as well. I mean, we're not going to take it back. Can't do anything with it. So let them enjoy it.
True. Trying to find a question.
With ours, we for kegs they already tapped. Some of our accounts already tapped. We trialed early on to give them brand new growlers at our cost, and just give them an opportunity to empty their the kegs that they've already tapped. And so those, they had to be all unopened growlers. So we gave them to the accounts for free to empty those out and then credit the kegs they have. I mean, for all of us, we're non-pasteurized, so 3-month shelf life, and then see if we can work with distillers to make hand sanitizer with it, and just donate it for that, and take the hit on all that beer. It's all there's nothing you can do with it now. It's a little more than we can consume back at the brewery.
Is that right, Josh?
Yeah, we're in the same boat. I mean, we've been talking to a distiller about hand sanitizer. I think that's the best thing that could come from that beer at this point. So, but I share the comment made about ramp up. I mean, if it's just a switch that goes back on, at the moment we're packaging 100% of what we're making, and so there's definitely gonna be a bit of lag before we have any beer to sell in kegs again. So, unfortunately, it doesn't feel like it's gonna be a quick thing anyway. But yeah, we're gonna have to kind of keep close to that just to make sure we've got what we need in the right format when the time comes.
Excellent. Okay, we're going to move to politics here. Can you talk about what Trudeau is offering the hospitality industry? And then we're going to think into the brewing. As assistance, tax deferral, wage subsidies, and what assistance would a brewery, but also as a brew pub chain such as any of yours, still need? What are people looking for at the federal, provincial, and local levels?
I go first. I mean, I think being able to defer tax is hugely important, and deferring excise tax, deferring the beer basic tax in Ontario, I think is key in terms of preserving cash flow in the short term. I think the challenge around, for instance, the wage subsidy program is that the clarity around it is still not to the point where you can have confidence in, number one, when you'd receive the dollars, and number two, whether or not you're eligible and qualify, because it seems to change almost on a daily basis from an eligibility perspective. So we haven't operated with the assumption that those funds are there. And obviously we're going to apply and utilize every resource that will be provided to the brewing industry or to employers to help us navigate this challenge. But, in some cases, I'll use the example of, the wage subsidy. We're not quite clear in terms of when that would, realistically come in terms of dollars for us. But there's also, the work share program where we do have some employees working on reduced hours. Is that a better option for our staff or is, the wage subsidy a better option? And how do those two programs sort of work together is not really clear. And so, so I think that there have been a lot of announcements that have happened, and I think, all of the talk is probably positive, but I think from an employer standpoint, if you're expecting them to keep people employed, it does need to move faster for it to be something that actually will result in employers being able to keep people on through this challenge.
Yeah, I'm of the same opinion. Between federal excise and provincial markups, that's the quickest way to get cash in a brewer's hand. To wait and try and maneuver your way and figure out some of these new programs. You got to have the cash to pay it first, and then wait to get that back. I think those other two programs or the other two taxes. It's a way to get cash in a brewer's hand right away. I mean, it's depending on the province you're in, it's pretty significant. $50, $60 to $70 a keg of taxes on that. So that's a way to get cash to keep liquidity in the business when when a lot of brewers are taking back and dumping beer and doing all those things. It's all stuff they've paid for already. The cash has to come somewhere to keep a lot of companies liquid with cash. To me, that's a way you can get cash in the hands of the brewers fastest.
Yeah, from what I've seen too, the wage subsidy, it's just basically a deferral when it comes time to pay your EI premiums later on. So it's something you won't have to pay out in 3 months. So again, cash in hand now, there's really not a lot of out there available to us right now, as far as I can see.
Yeah, I just building on what was said. I think the only thing we're just trying to keep view of is it's a deferral. It's not free money. So
That's
someday
right.
we're gonna pay it back, and we're trying not to get carried away. If you need it, you need it. You got to keep the lights on. But we're just recognizing that those come due someday. So that's tricky too. I think there'll probably be pressure on the government to take a hard look at what they're going to do long term with HST as well for the same reason. So I don't know. I don't envy what people running governments in this country are facing with right now. So I'm trying to be empathetic as well, but it's hard for sure. I think everybody's just trying to keep up with the day's news conference.
Yeah, we're certainly not the automotive or the airline industry. We will not be getting bailouts as far as I can tell. It's all money that we'll have to borrow and pay back.
All right. A question just came in, and it says, as this crisis may stick around longer than we initially thought, what are possibilities for collaborations between breweries for shared delivery to save time and mileage?
We're in a very small part of Toronto called Leslieville. A couple of breweries have reached out to us, as well as the distillery in the region. We're all friends. Everyone knows everyone in this industry. So we've already started talks about co-driving, sharing that responsibility. Somebody take the west side, somebody take the east side, things like that. So yeah, it's happening. It's going to be happening even more.
We're about 4 minutes. Thanks, Billy. There's one question. I think we've covered a lot of it already, but how do you see in 12 to 18 months the industry looking? Like when we talk about this conversation you guys have had today, when we look back at it, where will we be? Not a fair question, right? I don't envy.
Being a futurist to predict the future is really a difficult thing. But when you're looking at the broad picture and there is no vaccine for COVID-19. As we head into summer, which has always been our, the great win for us in Canada, that the flu would just sort of vaporize on us and then not come back until the fall. The rates of infection are high in Florida, so temperature must not impact this. Everything I'm seeing and hearing is social distancing or physical distancing is here to stay. We may get out of quarantine, in a couple months, but physical distancing, I'm not sure that's going to go away over the next 24 months until a vaccine is found. And everything I see is 17 to 24 months to develop that. So, big question marks for me is, are events outdoor concerts going to happen? Is bars and restaurants going to be allowed to go to capacity, or do they have to maintain 7 feet between groups eating at tables? And, they're all big questions that really, really, really change our social norms. And being in a social business, we're going to have to react to that and try to anticipate what those changes are going to be. I would be in the camp that there's going to be significant changes over 17 to 24 months that we have to learn how to adapt and live. I'll call it live with, but learn how to manage our business and thrive within that new environment. I don't see that. I don't think in 2 months from now that all of a sudden everything goes back to normal and we're all out and enjoying ourselves at the local pub. I don't think that's not coming in 2 months. I don't see that coming in 12 months. I think we're looking at a 17 to 24 month stretch that we need to learn how to operate our businesses differently. I hate to be the downer, but I don't know.
You got 1 minute for pause. It's the opposite view.
Everything's going to go back to normal. No, I'm just kidding. I agree with him.
I was just gonna say, people have been drinking beer for 4,000 years, so we got that on our side at least. I don't think the appetite for having a beer is going anywhere, thankfully. So people are still gonna want what we make, and I just totally agree that how and where they're gonna be consuming it is a total wild card, and I wouldn't pretend to know for sure. But I think you're right. We're gonna have to just adapt.
That's really too bad, guys. I was looking at you guys for an answer.
I think if we had a good set of darts, we'll come to, that'll be as good to find an answer on this as anything else.
It's crazy times. This is the end, you guys, of this chat, and I hope there's more. So thank you. And so I just want to say thank you to the speakers. We had Tim McLaughlin, Steam Whistle, Billy Madden from Black Lab, Brewing, Josh, Dominion City, and Wayne, Arsenault, Big Rock. More than appreciate you guys being here and sharing everything, all of your experiences, and keep doing it. We're going to take a 5-minute intermission, and then it'll be the supplier chat. Okay?
Thanks so much.
Okay, guys, thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to this special edition of Brewers Lectures, where we go virtual live and enjoy beers in the comfort of our own homes while listening to beer industry leaders discuss how they're coping with the current situation that seems to be the only topic of discussion today. I'm your host, Shelley. You may have been at the first panel and been with us, but on behalf of Brewers Journal Canada, I'm bringing you our second panel. And first, I need to talk about our supporters and sponsors. It's BSG Canada, SCOFAB, GBV360 Pro, and Nameless Productions. So joining us right now, we have Eric Vanderbeek from Diversity and Wakelin Fulford from Lakeside Process Controls. Welcome, gentlemen. I will also be joining the panel to give another supplier point of view when I represent BSG. Each of us will take turns kind of answering the same questions. Maybe we'll kind of talk the way the brewers were able to interact. But we're going to come forward to speak about what's facing the supply chain and how it interacts with the breweries. I know a lot of takeaways from that previous discussion. So I'm curious to know what you guys have to say. Eric, can you talk about diversity a little bit and who you are? And then Wakelin, can you follow up? Thanks.
Sure. Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, so my name is Eric Vanderbeek. I work for Diversity. I've been with the company for quite a number of years already. Started in 1997. Diversity, really, I guess, probably most of you have heard of the company, but we are a chemical company. So this time for us has been very interesting, like it has been for every one of you. We supply detergents, sanitizers to the industrial food industry, to breweries, and different food sectors as well. And from our perspective, right now, a lot of the questions coming back at us is what should facilities do from a sanitation perspective, from a washing perspective, a disinfecting perspective? What are the differences between sanitizers and disinfectants? How does, Health Canada come into play with all this, and what should we use? So I'm a sector specialist with Diversity, and have been doing that role with the company, really an automated CIP cleaning specialist for the last 10 years.
Wakelin?
So I'm from Lakeside Process Controls. Lakeside is a impact partner for the Emerson network. We do equipment sales, automation solutions, and full turnkey engineered packages throughout all industries. We are in food and beverage all the way to nuclear. So we are considered essential right till the end. As far as the food and bev industry goes, we are really focused on brewing and the cannabis industries, and then into any kind of like bakeries, juiceries, all that. My focus is in brewing mostly. My career has mostly been with Molson Coors, doing engineering, operations, and project management. And I've been with Lakeside for the last 7 or 8 months, doing technical sales for them in the industry.
Very nice. I'll take a turn. My name is Shelley Bierns. I work with BSG. I handle key accounts, so touching base with breweries across the country, and then in my own backyard, working with the breweries in southwestern Ontario, kind of Collingwood, Toronto, Etobicoke, or whatever, down over to Windsor, Sarnia. I've been with the company since 2013. Watch the industry evolve just like you guys have, and that's what we're going to talk about today, how we can work together. So the first question really for us is, considering the current state of the industry, we just heard that, what is your experience as a supplier? What is your response? And we can layer these if we need to. How are you supporting your customers? And Eric, if you don't mind going first.
No, that's great. Yeah, that would be the big question, how we're supporting our customers. Obviously, being in the chemical industry, the sanitation industry, for us, there's been a lot of things. The immediate call from almost every customer to try and purchase every possible sanitizer on the market was a sort of a very interesting beginning of this. And so that's been a little bit difficult to manage from a company perspective, but we have our lines running 24/7 and we're producing as much sanitizer and then obviously maintaining the production of all of our normal detergents that we're sending out to the industry. In the background, now that we're not really allowed to go out into the customer sites, and most of the customers will not allow us to come in anyway, and everybody's staying at home, we've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes. I've been putting together sanitation procedures, standard operating procedures around things like disinfecting versus sanitizing, what products we're supposed to use. We've been putting out some one-pagers, hand washing documents. How do we normally, or how best do we go around cleaning the common areas or the welfare areas or lunchrooms, washrooms, hallways, things of that nature, and then what sanitizers or disinfectants should we utilize around that whole part of it. And then I think from a cleaning perspective in the plants, not too much has actually changed. Some plants have wanted to go to a real quote unquote disinfectant that has some emerging pathogen approval behind it so that they can put that onto food contact surfaces, which normal sanitizers don't have that type of approval. But so we've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes, putting documentation together for our customers and sending that out to them.
Okay. I'll start with the kind of state of the industry for us as a supplier, and then I'll move into how we're supporting the customers. I'd say the biggest challenge right now is even connecting with customers. On an equipment side, that's not really a huge priority these days, obviously. And especially with kind of the business struggles and even having kids at home and trying to educate them and keep them entertained is a huge burden on, I think, a lot of us. I've had calls with people with their kids in the background just screaming away, and that's the new reality. You sort of have to accept it and work through it. Capital spend in the industry, for the most part, has paused or been canceled. Even if it is considered essential, I think a lot of businesses are worried about what's going to happen down the road. So we're seeing a lot of projects slow down. Some things are going ahead here and there are the odd emergency ones, which is good to keep us going. And our physical services as well, because we can't access the sites, is often limited or not, like pretty much you cannot do it. We're stopped there. Equipment supply is still going because we supply a lot of maintenance and parts and that kind of thing. So our supply chain is quite robust through Emerson. That's a global supply chain. They can flex a lot. So if one area of the world gets hit hard, they can move fabrication and manufacturing around. So that's good. So it does mean that our supply should not be interrupted at all. And then I think that another big challenge there in the industry is that our Canadian dollar is taking quite a hit against the US dollar. So what we're finding is prices have gone up. Quoting is difficult to guarantee for any amount of time. So if people do want to move forward in things, often it's sort of have to kind of put prices out there and move ahead right away. As far as actually supporting our customers, we're starting to do a lot of webinars, online training, education sessions, both on technical talks, equipment talks. Pretty much if anyone wants something, we can do them directly, or we'll have kind of larger ones that you can sign up for. We also have a 24/7 emergency services supporting on maintenance, engineering, anything from sanitary welding to like powerhouse support. As customers are losing staff and have an ability to maintain them, we're kind of trying to help bridge that gap through the struggles. And then I think beyond that, offering technical engineering consulting, maybe project planning down the road, there's no cost to that early on. So sort of if people have the time and they're not too pressed, it's not a bad time to start that long-term planning for when we come out of this, however long that may be, and kind of getting yourself set up for the future. And even though we are just trying to survive right now.
Right on. From our point of view at BSG, I failed to say what we actually do. I apologize for that. So we do sell, import, and distribute. We even do our own malting, raw materials. And as you heard the brewers talking about, they're running. So there were a lot of unknowns in the beginning, whether they'd be shut down or not. And so what we've been busy looking at and asking a lot of questions are related to incoming product, whether it's from Alberta or some products from the US or imported goods. So there's the full truckloads, less than full truckloads coming over the border domestically, the container availability from Europe, the role of China in all of this on a regular basis. That's what we focus on. Definitely challenged during their shutdown, locking up containers, not locking up containers. Backlog of freight, what happens at cross docks, what happens with carriers, if consumers stop ordering things, does it lead to chaos? We've never really seen it at this level before, whether there's chaos or not. What we're learning is it's really well managed and we have great partners, so we're lucky for that. Things you might see cut back on are service offerings with carriers, where they may not make as many appointments because they're stretched thin. So it's being really organized, thinking forward, realizing there is stress and tension, but everything's moving. The border itself, because it's open, we've had zero issues. And on top of it, trucks are actually, I heard, moving 2% faster now because there's less traffic and congestion. That's great. And our main focus is on our employee safety, and we've heard that throughout this afternoon already. We can get back to that a little later, but that's a big one. It doesn't matter where the product is. We've got it in our 4 warehouses and we can't move it because we don't have the staff. The product doesn't matter anymore. So they're our main focus. Can you talk a little bit to the biggest challenges, I guess? I think you both did a little bit. Maybe, how do I word this? Because there are our own challenges as suppliers, and then there's the challenges of the breweries. And they can be quite different. So let's talk about, I think we're really here to help the breweries and our customers. So can you think of name the top 3 challenges they're facing and how you can help them? And you kind of went into it a little bit, but prioritize it, perhaps?
I think for me, one of the big questions that comes from all of our customers is, what is a customer going to do, or what do they think we should be recommending to them if they have one of their own employees that comes down with the virus, and sort of the remedial cleaning action, the deep cleaning dive that has to happen if something like that takes place. Obviously, a person like myself or even our account managers aren't going into sites at this time. So everything that we're doing to help is from afar for the most part. But the customers are really wanting to know what they need to do to protect themselves if an event like that actually takes place. And so, obviously, if a person is come down with a virus, they're going to have to go home and go to the doctor and get assessed and tested and all of that type of thing. But once that's been done, then through HR, the facility that they're working at, they probably have their own policies on what should happen. But then from a cleaning perspective, that's where we sort of get involved. And so, where that employee has been, maybe others he has been in close contact with, that all has to be considered. I think that's probably the hardest thing for any of the facilities to deal with right now. Yes, there's emergency equipment issues. There's emergency CIP or cleaning issues. But I think the employee safety and cleaning of areas, deep cleaning once an employee has possibly tested positive, how you screen visitors or other people coming to the facility, those are all things that are very important right now.
From our side, whereas more with the equipment and services, I think really following the guidelines properly when we are on calls, making sure we are safe, and supporting all our customers to keep operating and keep their companies moving forward. So if you don't have the people to maintain your equipment and keep going, we want to make sure our guys are available whenever you need to keep your operations running at all times. We've had emergency calls where like a pipe is burst and we'll send in our team, really following good sanitary practices to keep our distance and be safe, but also support that operation going forward. A lot of the a lot of fabrication installers, engineering houses have seen massive drops in business right now. So as they have to lay off and can't maintain their people, that pool of service groups out there is going to reduce. And long term, how many of them can maintain is going to be interesting to see as this drags on. So I think it'll become more and more critical to have those service groups available as staffing levels drop if we can't afford to keep people on in different customer locations.
Lakeland, I have a question for you about the equipment itself. I've talked to a few guys this week who, have their tap rooms and then, small bottles going out the door or very few cans compared to maybe their tap room sales.
Yeah.
So they're running now these little bottle fillers and they're stressing the equipment. Do you have advice on how to maintain, or what is if they have the lifetime of the equipment? They were intending to perhaps buy a can line. Now they're in freeze mode. They're now able to keep people employed running the bottle filler. It could be an 8-head. Do you have advice on the stress on the equipment?
So I think doing regular stops and quick maintenance is a really good thing. So take 15 minutes, stop your production, clean everything, remove broken glass or jam pieces or weared parts that you can change quickly, and keep that going. I remember a good example of this for larger production, but like on a bottle washer, for instance, glass tends to break on the infeed, it builds up, and eventually starts to destroy stuff. So if you can regularly stop, clean, and then start up again, you can maintain your equipment a lot longer. And inspecting it regularly, a lot of places run to fail. If you want your stuff to keep going for a long time, you really need to change to preventive maintenance behavior. And I think a lot of smaller places aren't usually at that stage of their in their business. So that's actually something we can help with too. We can do that remotely as well, just to be discussions and walk through where failures are happening or where they expect failures to be happening, and work through how we can provide maintenance services for that. And I think that's kind of where our team can help there too. If they don't have the technicians in-house to do that, it can be quick service calls and just make sure we keep our distance and they can come and keep them going.
That's excellent. From our point of view, we kind of have to rely on our customers to support them. We need their information. We need to know if they're usually ordering a certain amount of product, running at 100% and they're at 50. We kind of need to know that so that we can maintain our inventory levels. Or if suddenly they've gone to 120% because they have a great distribution channel. So we're on the phone all the time. So open doors for the entire team, including our customer service team. They can help filter any of the calls back over to the sales team. So that is super important. I would say we have a call every half hour with someone just discussing. It could be 3 calls a day alone on just inventory support across the country, with brewers across the country. Even if you typically would have 6 SKUs requiring certain malts, unique products, maybe 2 or 3, and you're avoiding those now, you're kind of dropping them for a multitude of reasons. Just call and let us know, because we can't predict what's going to move and what's not, or if that suddenly spikes. That's a big one, the inventory. The second one would be certain brands like lagers. They have to spend more time in their tanks. And that's not really a luxury right now. If that was, you've got 3 SKUs of lager and those are the ones everyone's drinking and ordering online. So I recommend calling your suppliers like us, and we might have solutions to help you reduce the time. Like diacetyl issues, you're going to be pressured to maybe bottle or package sooner than you want, and you really don't want that beer out there. So really think twice about it. There might be solutions out there. So just reach out, talk about it. Even go to some of the forums out there or cruise the websites, look stuff up. So that's one thing. And then again, one thing we need to be is flexible. Brew schedules change all the time, and we hear that, just being flexible. And our systems aren't always built for that right now. But there's this yo-yoing going on, so we work really, really hard to be flexible. It's not always easy to get an order there the next day if it needs to be changed 3 times. So we appreciate the patience, but that's one of our goals. So those would be probably the top 3 I can think of, really. And it's really an interaction. We rely on all the breweries. Don't be afraid to call. Just trying to think of the next question here. I think we have about 5 minutes or so. There's a question for me actually that came in based on imports. BSG typically has a wide range of product available, much of it imported. How has the European lockdown affected the supply chain for producers like Weyermann, Simpsons, Crisper, Dingemans? And this is an interesting assumption that we've been getting and hearing about. There is actually no disruption right now. If you think about, it takes about 12 weeks, 3 months for that product to come in. So it's already been ordered 12 weeks ago. It's coming on the water and coming in. In fact, if breweries are slowing down, we might end up having to find more room for it in the space. So a little more pressure on our warehouses. It's when we move out and how, and that's what the breweries were talking about. Is it going to be lightning fast? And that accordion just all of a sudden the malt gets sucked out of the warehouses and go into those brews. We have to be ready for that. So we're looking at all kinds of things. We build scenarios, so there might be the slow scenario and the quick one. So we are looking at all of those things. Again, just keep talking to us. But right now everything's fine. Those are very old companies, so risk management's built into their systems. And our company's an old company essentially, and so they've been through things. It's built into our system as well. Newer companies, I think, are nimble, so that's a benefit. So when I'm talking with them, it looks like everyone's set, and you haven't heard many ingredient issues. I haven't heard that. The brewers didn't bring it up today, so that was good to not hear about. I guess just trying to see if there's anything else that came in.
Do you want to talk about recovery? What
that's the next one. Yep. How to come out of it. Go ahead, Wakeland.
Sure, I can go first. I'm a bit of an optimist. I'm hoping that we're going to see a bit of an economic boom as this recovers, as everyone kind of comes out to play again. But I think there's going to be a bit of a gap in the industry in that you're going to see companies not make it through this. So kind of you may go out to find a supplier, someone you used to engage with, and then they're gone, or they're quite shrunk from what they were. So I think doing things like looking for stimulus money and looking at grants and that kind of stuff to make sure you can get your own projects going, but also engaging with suppliers, well, maybe not right now as you're sort of finding your feet through this crisis, but before it ends, make sure you engage with them and know who's available to support you to keep you growing. We're also looking at doing options like what we call solutions as a service. So moving capital money into operational money. Essentially, instead of buying equipment, you can buy the solution. So something like CIP or wastewater treatment, where you can kind of measure usages and spread the cost of that over time, will be something that I think will help a lot of companies weather this, because I don't think the capital money is going to be there for quite a while for a lot of customers. So trying to find ways to change our business models and work with them to help them kind of move forward to the next phase and upgrade their facilities. What else do I have here? Yeah, and then as far as the grants goes, there's lots out there, and I think a lot of people don't leverage them. And there are consultants who can support that. There's thousands, so there's people you can reach out to. They'll help you apply for those and to set yourself up for coming out of this with projects. And there's really no cost until you get it, and they take like a small percentage of the grant. So it's a good way to get a few, like thousands of dollars towards new equipment if you need it.
Very useful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, from our perspective, from Diversity's perspective, there's going to be a lot of trying to fulfill the product demand for the orders that have been placed, bringing in detergents and sanitizers back into the plant that might have been back ordered during this time, especially on the sanitizer side of things. Diversity, as well as the food and beverage division, we have our more institutional division, which is all the hotels and restaurants, which obviously have been deeply impacted by this particular pandemic. And so that's going to be an interesting thing coming out. How many of them, like Wicklund was saying, are going to open? Which businesses aren't going to survive this? It's going to be an interesting and difficult time for many. You know, I think at least for the next number of years, this event is going to probably have made some significant or changes, and is going to have a pretty big impact on all of us. And I think a lot of facilities are going to, whereas maybe sanitation was a bit of an afterthought, I think coming out of this, facilities are going to put a lot more importance on sanitation and the ability for them to protect their employees in a way that maybe they hadn't thought of in the past. So I just think it's going to be an interesting time moving forward, and there's going to be a lot of work to be done coming out of it.
All right. Yeah, I think the near term, definitely we're focused on the lifting of restrictions. I think this is on the top of my head every day. And building those scenarios, as I mentioned. As a company, it'll be increased flexibility in the supply chain, but with the continuity. I think we're already on that path. So I know we're on that path because I can see it every day, and I work with meetings every day, and it's working. So we've already put the right people in place, I think, and thankfully, I wouldn't like to imagine what it would be like moving that much product around without that. So kudos to our team. I just want to say that, but also just finding and working with great partners. I think we've got great partners as well, and learning who the new ones are. So I think, you know, we're going to shake out the coat and keep what worked and what didn't, analyze it, and go from there. On the brewery side, what I see are businesses over the past 2 years that really invested in their planning, their management, and control of spending, really focused on that, or they were already doing well coming out of the winter. And they'll make it through, and I really want to emphasize that. And it's hard to watch when we're struggling and you're making decisions every day, but that effort, I'm seeing it paying off. So I can see a lot of emphasis being, well, it's going to have to happen either way in the future, because we don't know what's going to happen. But that wraps up this session, guys. Just want to thank you guys both for coming. And so that's Eric and Wicklund. And we're going to take another 5-minute break. All right.
Eric.
Thanks, guys. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to this panel and the special edition of Brewers Lectures, where we go virtual live and enjoy beers in the comfort of our own homes while listening to beer industry experts like the two coming up as they discuss how they're coping with the current situation related to COVID. And I'm your host, Shelley Bierens, on behalf of Brewers Journal Canada and BSG. And before we jump into our next panel, again, I need to thank our presenting sponsor, BSG, as well as our supporting sponsors, Ska Fab, GBV 360 Pro, and Nameless Productions. And this is our final panel where we will chat with Luke Chapman, the interim president of Beer Canada. Most of you probably have heard him speak before or have talked with him on the phone. Please say hi, Luke.
Hello, everyone.
And Rick Dalmazzi, the executive director of the Canadian Craft Brewers Association.
Hi there.
They're coming from Muskoka and Ottawa, and we've all decided that we're all very cold right now. So anyway, so here are some of the first questions for both of you. How do you see COVID-19 affecting the beer industry, and how the beer industry, how is it navigating these challenges from your point of view and your positions? Luke, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I'll get started, and I think I can probably keep the response to this question pretty short. I think from our perspective and Beer Canada's perspective, I think it's still a little bit too early to tell what the short and midterm impact of COVID-19 is having on the beer industry. Obviously, there's going to be likely a larger impact for smaller brewers that rely on tap rooms for the majority of their sales. But I can say what we're hearing from some of our kind of regional and larger size members is there actually might have been a little bit of an uptick in sales throughout the month of March. And we'll have a better idea of what that looked like once we get our March monthly sales data ready to be distributed, which will hopefully happen, I think, in the next week or two. So that'll be interesting to see. But I think also, yeah, the reality is, you look at the national beer sales in Canada, and draft sales account for roughly 12% of total national beer sales. So that's pretty much a market that's disappeared overnight. So you can't remove 12% of the market and expect nothing to change. So we're really interested to see what March looks like, and then going forward, I think that's actually probably the more worrisome component to this is what May and June look like, the months that typically drive beer sales with the cancellation of sporting events and other social gatherings. I think that's really where things start to become a little bit more worrisome. But I think in the short term, we might see a bit of an uptick.
Now me?
Yes, Rick, go ahead.
In the craft beer world, of which there are now 1,100 craft breweries across the country, definitely not an uptick in March. So we know that across the country, generally speaking, about 70% of the employees were laid off in the craft beer world. And we also know that in the month of March, about 35% of the breweries out there said that their revenues were lower than 50% versus the same month last year. So and they're predicting even worse than that for the month of April. So it's definitely a hit. Depending on what you're able to do, a lot of craft breweries were able to sort of pivot a little bit and do things like home delivery. Home delivery has been a real boon for craft breweries, or at least relatively. It's allowed them to keep moving some beer out. But there are a couple of provinces and a couple of territories that don't even have the ability to do that because their provincial governments haven't allowed it. So in terms of what we're doing as associations, there are issues at the provincial level, and there are also issues at the federal level. And as I said, a couple of provinces can't even do the home delivery. So, in the craft world, people are sort of hunkering down, expecting it to turn even worse in April, don't really know in May. And, looking to some of the government programs to try to provide some of the financial relief that they need to keep their businesses open.
I have a question related to that. Are we looking at different ways to measure beer? and the statistics? Because I mean, we're using new channels, new relationships, and everything. Has that evolved at all, or are you looking towards doing that, or is it the same old usual? And maybe they work. This is the side of the industry I'm not as familiar with.
In terms of measuring like performance, sales performance through different channels, that kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, you know what, Luke, I'm going to let you start that because Luke just published a new 2019 update with lots of good measurements in there. So why don't you start, Luke?
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting because, yeah, as Rick just alluded to, we released our 2020 annual industry trends report this morning. I think what that showed was that, prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, there were some trends moving in a very interesting direction. As everyone's aware, we've seen the number of breweries in Canada grow to over 1,100, while at the same time we saw domestic beer sales decrease by about 4%. So I guess what that works out to is a market that's super competitive, and brewers competing over a shrinking size of a pie. So I'm not sure if we're in a position where moving forward we're going to be able to measure the impact it's having on different sales if you're looking at off-premise and on-premise. But I think we'll definitely be in a position to look at it on a national level and understand what the impact is.
We're just in the craft beer world, Shelley. We're just kind of getting going as a national association. So I think that we're going to make good use of surveys. When you can go out to 1,000 breweries, right, and hope even if you get a 15 to 25, 30% response, you can get a real sense of what's going on. So as we mature a little bit and the months go by, we'll do some polling and some surveying and ask people how the dynamics are changing. I think they are. There's new channels. The online channel is new. The home delivery channel may be a new channel that we'll see after this. It'll be interesting to see what happens post-COVID, just in general, in terms of consumer behavior. I think just talking bigger than the beer industry, I think that sectors in general have been, doing a better job of this whole thing of online shopping and home delivery, and maybe people are going to, get used to that and want it more. That may carry over into our sector. So, yeah.
Okay. Our next question is, I'm going to combine two of them. What do members or what are breweries needing the most right now? And if it's related to our lawmakers' powers, do they have their attention?
Rick, do you want me to start, or do you want to start that one?
Yeah, I'll start. We haven't been around. The CCB hasn't been around for too long, so Luke and Beer Canada have more experience at this. But what I've observed is that I think you do have lawmakers' attention. I think the lawmakers, especially on the finance side. So if we start by saying mostly what breweries need is financial support. Yes, province by province, they need programs to open up, but mostly they need financial support, just like most other businesses. And so I think that what I've observed is that at the federal government level, the federal government tries to do things, first and foremost to help businesses and individuals, generally speaking. So it's a little bit hard right now to start banging on the door for industry-specific relief, to say, look, this is what craft brewers need, or this is what the brewery business needs. And there are some exceptions, but mostly governments start by saying, okay, what does everyone need? And then over time, they'll start looking at sector relief. It's a little bit harder to go after sector relief right away. Got to be a little bit patient and kind of work behind the scenes on it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think from Beer Canada's perspective, kind of similar thoughts to what Rick just laid out there. But I wouldn't say that it's been a challenge to get their attention, but at this point in time, and understandably so, it's been a little bit of an uphill battle to get them to actually implement some of the things that we're asking for, that we know that would be helpful to Canadian brewing companies. But with that being said, obviously recognize that this is a huge pandemic, a huge crisis that's affecting a wide array of different sectors across Canada's economy. Some in a much more large way than it's affecting brewing companies. So we recognize that there's a priority to these types of things. And the approach that the government's taken up to this point is they're looking at measures and programs that will provide some relief to a broad spectrum of different sectors across Canada. So that's the approach that they've taken. The Canadian wage subsidy, the 75% subsidy, I know will be very helpful to a number of different types of businesses, both large and small across Canada, including brewing companies. Yeah, I think as they kind of go down that priority list in the weeks to come, we're hoping, fingers crossed, that we'll be in a position to get their attention and actually, hopefully get them to implement some measures that will be helpful to our specific sector.
If I could just add, Shelley, there is one thing that we were able to get, just aside from the financial relief. The last thing that breweries need now is more red tape or more new processes. So we were able to get the Canadian Food Inspection Agency to defer the policing of. They didn't actually move the implementation date. It's still July 15th, but they said they weren't really going to hold the breweries to that. To the implementation requirements of the traceability requirements. So for those out there who have been following, beginning of last year, the government announced around safe food regulations that breweries would have to do traceability or implement traceability. And so we've actually been working, Beer Canada did some work initially, and we've been doing some more recently. And CFIA did agree to defer that. So that's just one thing breweries don't have to worry about for now.
Can you both describe how you go about, I don't know if you call it lobbying. Can you describe how you interact? I mean, Luke, I think this is one thing we don't know. Luke, you're in Ottawa. How often are you speaking with people? Is it a big part of your tasks, or is it easy? Just so members know.
Yeah, it's there's no real straightforward process to these types of efforts. I mean, this particular situation that we're in right now, we have a lot of commonalities with our counterparts in the wine and spirit sector. I know we fight for market share, but when we deal with these types of issues, we tend to try to work together. As a beverage alcohol sector, it's more of an efficient approach. And it seems to have more legitimacy in the eyes of the regulators. So that's in large part the approach we've taken with this crisis. Is we've had pretty much weekly conversations with our colleagues in the wine and spirits industry. We brought in some of the organizations, including the Canadian Craft Brewers Association and some of the hospitality and tourism organizations, into under an umbrella to talk about how we can be mutually helpful to each other. So we did get to the point where we were writing a letter. We're going out to our members, asking them to connect with their local MPs, and then have them go into the ministers' offices to actually speak directly to them about these types of issues. In my experience, obviously there's a role for the associations to play in these types of situations, but it's also extremely important that individual brewing companies take on some of the responsibility by going out to their local MPs and explaining what they're dealing with. I think the associations are limited in the influence they can have in that space, and in my experience, it's extremely helpful when you get that action from the breweries themselves to undertake that type of step. It tends to move the issues forward more efficiently. So it's again no straightforward process, but as far as my conversations go, I would say at this point, I'm speaking to the folks in the finance minister's office, which is the ministry that's making a lot of these decisions on a weekly basis, just to get updates on how things are going.
It's a pretty interesting world, actually. This world of lobbying. You sort of do it at different levels. As Luke said, you certainly try to get in as high as you can and talk to the ministers of the different departments. Finance is important. On the political thing, on the political side, there's the members of parliament. So, the MPs all know, and I say this to the breweries across the country all the time, if you don't know your MP or your MPP, get to know them, because they sure as heck know you. And they know what, that brewery in their riding does for the economic development in that riding. So, getting to know them is good. And then really important is getting to know and develop relationships with the senior public servants. So these are the people who, regardless of who's in power, they do their job day in and day out, and they run the program. So like an example of an important department for us in beer is the agriculture and agri-food. So for the last couple of years, they've made money available in the form of programs that breweries will recognize. They were called Growing Forward 1 and Growing Forward 2. And this is money that's a combination of federal and provincial money. Well, that just changed again to something called the Canadian Agricultural Partnership. And they've got money. They've got money for anybody involved in food production. So, you want to get to know those folks too. Luke and Beer Canada have been doing this for a long time. For craft beer, lobbying is really education. And it's, really explaining what we do as an industry and the role that we play in communities. And the line I always use to anybody that will listen is, name one other industry in Canada that's put a new manufacturing facility into hundreds of small towns and communities across the country in the last 10 years. And you can't name one other than the beer industry, craft beer. So, people understand what we do in communities, and you try to get them to understand that we also need financial support because we're important in those communities. So it's a lot of education.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. We have about 10 minutes. I see 2 questions thereabouts. 3. One just came in. Right. Okay. I'm going to go do these 2, and then if we have time, we can do that one. This is a question from the audience, came in earlier today. As the titular heads of organizations that represent breweries across Canada, does the result of the Brewers Association in the U.S. COVID-19 survey, which states cumulative 60% of breweries would be unable to survive a 3-month lockdown, would this ring true for Canada? How should we interpret this number? And considering that we have differences in our economies, our economic situations, how we do business, and our political differences. We've always looked to U.S. craft. They've inspired us. They started the revolution. Is this a point, are we similar? Is it safe to look at that number?
I think one of the interesting statistics that came from our annual industry trends report, and that it might be relevant in answering this question, is, as I said earlier, there's over 1,100 breweries in Canada right now, and of those 1,100, 94% of them produce under 15,000 hectoliters of beer annually. So when you're talking, and Rick can build on this, but when you're talking to breweries that size, I'm assuming that the vast majority of their revenue is coming from draft sales, whether that be tap rooms or restaurants. So I would argue that if that's the results that they're seeing from the survey in the U.S. with the Brewers Association, then if this were to continue on the same kind of way it has for the next 3 to 4 months, I would be of the view that it's quite likely that we would start to see similar closures happening across Canada. That would be my suspicion, but I'm not sure if Rick has a different thought.
So we've just started doing some surveying, and actually within a couple of days we're going to post the results of those surveys on our website. And so generally speaking, things are coming back like, when we ask questions like, how many months of cash do you have? The majority of breweries say they've got a couple of months of cash. So yeah, we are going to see numbers similar to the U.S. The U.S. is a little bit ahead of us in terms of the sort of pivot into the tap room business and kind of really moving into the hospitality
Right.
flavor, right? So they may be a little bit worse off. One of the things that's encouraging to me, and again, just looking at the early results, and we'll publish these, is that although breweries are struggling, I've only seen one that has actually shut down. And I've seen very few that have said, we intend to shut this brewery down. So what we're seeing is breweries just hunkering down, closing a few of them have closed temporarily, going down to skeleton staff if you have to, sort of keep the lights on and weather the storm. But right now, most of the breweries say they've just got a couple of months of cash. So, we'll see. But again, hit our website in the next, by next week for sure, we'll have the results of the first survey.
Thanks, Rick. That's good to know, guys. I think this is probably the last question. I just need to read one. I'm going to read it. Given Beer Canada's reported 4% drop in domestic volume for 2019, what impact on volume is COVID-19 situation likely to have on 2020? I mean, we're in April. If things stabilize and remain as is for 3 or 4 months, are you guys looking forward that much? I mean, we all are, and that's why we're building the models.
Yeah, I think, again, as I said earlier, I think from my perspective, I don't think March is the big concern. If I were to be a betting person, I would say that we might legitimately see a bit of an uptick in total national beer sales volume for the month of March. I think where things become very concerning is when you go into May and June, the typical months where there's a lot of the beer events, the beer festivals, concerts, other social gatherings. Once we see those start canceling, patios closing, that's where I think things become very worrisome, and I think that could have a big impact on what total 2020 year sales look like. So obviously everyone's probably thinking the same way that I am, but the sooner that we can get together and have a beer as a group, the better for the industry in general.
Yeah, I don't have too much more to add to that. I agree with that. It's pretty hard to really look out a number of months. It gets pretty scary if things don't change in some way, in a couple of months. There's no doubt that the craft sector will be hurt, particularly by this. So it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard to predict. I mean, so the beer industry is down by, what was it, Luke, 4% in general?
The domestic industry, the domestic total industry is 3%, yeah.
Yeah, and craft is still the craft sector is still growing, but on the other hand, it will also be hurt the most, I believe, by if COVID continues on for months and months, right? Because of the hospitality nature of the business. So.
Yeah, and I mean, Luke, this is percent volume, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's volume.
Right. So, I mean, if you're a brewery that you might be making the same amount of beer, but you've lost your high margin tap room beer sales, you might be moving the same amount of product.
Yeah.
So, they have the whole business model.
The same returns. That's exactly it. Yeah. So that's another variable to add into the equation for sure.
That's a big one. Pretty much out of time. Do you guys have any last things to say that might help? I have a lot of questions coming in. I think they're a little older. Do you see? I mean, we had the 4 speakers from breweries earlier. Do you see things working better in certain areas, pockets of success, or obviously you're speaking with breweries all across the nation. So, any little nuggets that you've come across?
I think if you watched how provinces, particularly Ontario, and I think there's a couple others, how they've loosened up retail sales for beverage alcohol over the last month, I think we'd be of the view, and I think most brewers and most associations would be of the view, if those kind of stuck around after this crisis was a distant memory, that would be, I think, great for the industry in general. I know I ordered some beer from a restaurant the other night, and it was a pretty seamless process. So those types of kind of things, if they stuck around, I think that would be great.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also think that not everybody has this opportunity. There are some breweries out there where the owners and the folks that run the business are now the brewers, and they're doing everything, so they don't have a lot of what I would call downtime or time to think about things. But if there's any time to reflect, it's a good time to sort of reflect on your business and think about, a lot of these, a lot of the breweries out there, a lot of businesses in general sort of evolved over the years, and things happen, and you add and you you do things. And sometimes if you just sit back and think about, okay, what really is working, what really is not working, craft breweries have already started moving towards understanding the profitability of, their tap room and their retail sales versus the sales through distribution. Start thinking about maybe being a little leaner and meaner, maybe really understanding that having a great brewery is not just having great beer. You've got to have a great business. And, maybe there's an opportunity for a little reflection on what do I really need at this point? What are the key pieces of my business? If they have the luxury of a little bit of downtime to think about that.
Sure. All right, gentlemen, I think that's everything for today.
Great.
Thanks, Luke.
Okay, thanks very much for the time. Thanks for the invitation, and hopefully we can all get together for a beer sooner rather than later.
Definitely.
Oh,
Thanks,
Greg.
guys.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
I'm going to say thank you, though, to the viewers and the speakers and sponsors for making this virtual lecture a reality, with the aim of continuing to build communities in the beer industry and supporting them by allowing a platform where everyone's included. And this webinar will be available at a later date for those who missed it today. And I just want to say thank you. And I think kudos to Brewers Journal for putting this together quite swiftly. And I saw what they did behind the scenes, and I'm sure they're going to have a six-pack. So anyway, thank you, everybody. Be safe and keep talking to each other. Cheers.